Hello and welcome to episode 10 of Talking Ruggers. That's right, we've made it to double digits. This is the podcast where we talk ruggers with over 100 people involved in our beloved game who isn't only a current professional player. From online coaches and clothing designers to marketers and content creators. Everyone who's bringing our beloved game forward into the 21st century. And this week, we are talking ruggers with someone who is trying to make it all the way to the top of the game and leveraging social media in the process to help get him there. He has an internationally interesting rugby story, playing across the world in Hong Kong, Ireland, Canada and England, but has his eyes set on representing the Canadian national team as a means of credibility to get a professional contract. Through his journey, he brings some incredible stories and insightful advice on how to actually play rugby in different parts of the world, as well as suggesting how rugby in the modern era could be fixed through social media, just as long as you can get past some of the abuse. You may know him as the Rugby T, but today we are talking ruggers with the man behind the brand, Tiarnan Neville. Before we get into any of that though, I just wanted to thank you. That's right, you listening along right now for supporting the podcast. You may be thinking, how on earth have I supported the podcast? I just listen along, but that's exactly how. You are here every week and I really appreciate you being here because helps make my life a whole lot easier knowing that I'm talking to someone out there and not just myself going crazy. But no, sincerely, thank you so much for your support. If you could continue it by going down below this episode, dropping a like on it, a 5-star review, if that's how you feel about it, if that's the podcast platform provider that you are listening through, then they'd be greatly appreciated. And make sure you hit the subscribe button too, so you never miss an episode every Tuesday on your commute to training. This was a really interesting conversation, so I'm not going to delay it any further. Thank you so much for your support again. Let's get straight into the episode. In your own words, describe to me what or who is the Rugby T.
So the Rugby T is an aspiring professional rugby player. It used to be professional. Now it's an aspiring international rugby player because the pathway to becoming a professional player for myself is almost easier if I get an international cap for Canada in the first place. Because once you have that recognition, that international standard with coaches that you already know, it's a lot easier to, get a professional contract rather than just being a club player. You might have the quality, but they may just overlook you. So I'm an aspiring professional rugby player via the journey of trying to get an international cap for the Canadian national team.
And that's the slightly confusing thing for me, starting first and foremost, and probably for a few people who were listening along to this podcast, because your accent is awfully deceiving, because you're saying Canada. I'm hearing a little bit of Irish in there as well. Talk me through your heritage and where rugby first started for you.
Yeah, so my dad's Irish, my mum's Canadian, but they actually met in Hong Kong, and that's where I was born. It's where all my siblings were born, and it's where we all grew up for the first 18 years of our lives. After that, we ended up going to, different places around the world for university. I ended up going to the UK, to Durham University. My siblings, some went to the UK, some went to Canada. But yeah, I grew up in Hong Kong for 18 years. I started playing rugby at the age of 6. And from that point onwards, I played rugby from the age of 6 to now. At the same time, because my dad's Irish in a foreign country, he kind of threw us all into every sport. So I also played football growing up from the same age up until the age of 18. Obviously, I played the Irish sports as well, Gaelic football and hurling. I would do that in Hong Kong with my family, as well as other Irish people in Hong Kong. And then I'd also play that back in Ireland in the summer when we would come back for the holidays. So it was kind of an all-engrossing sporting life growing up, centralized in Hong Kong mainly, and then spending time over the summers in Ireland and Canada.
Wowza, what an upbringing. That's fascinating that they have, I was going to say rugby first and foremost in Hong Kong, but I did know that was the case. But like hurling and Gaelic football being out there is even more wild to me. But funnily enough, I was fortunate enough to go to Dubai Sevens the other weekend, and I bumped into Luke Trahan out there. This is Sevens guy, and he was telling me all about how big rugby is in Hong Kong. I had somewhat of an idea, but not how idea how big it was. Talk me through what it was like coming through the age grades there, because I, over here in the UK, started playing when I was 5, and it was pretty miserable with how cold and wet and windy it is, but maybe a little bit better over there.
Yeah, like it was definitely a lot better than having to play age grade
Yeah.
rugby on, muddy pitches. And I can understand why kids would be put off by it at a young age in the UK and Ireland, because, even at that age, no one wants to get wet and cold. But yeah, to put it frank, like it was great weather. The seasons played the same season as the UK. So we're not playing during the hottest months, which kind of would be impossible. But the cold months aren't cold at all. Like you know, the start of the season is still about 30 degrees, and then the coldest part of the season maybe like low 20s, high 10s in terms of weather. And then, you get the occasional rainy day, but the good thing about Hong Kong is the rain is actually warm. So you're not freezing. And then once you get dry, you dry off pretty quickly compared to here where you just stay damp the whole day. Yeah, like it's a growing sport. Still it's a big expat sport. So if you look at a lot of the men's teams there, it's a lot of the teams are either imports from other countries up to a certain allowance, obviously per the league's rules, but a lot of people who have come for work because it's such an international financial center, and they like playing rugby. They've either played like at an academy or high club level in the UK, and now are focusing on, their professional in terms of like, banking career. But then as well on the side, they might still want to play rugby. They still like, it's a semi-professional league, so they can still get money on the side as well to kind of top up. I doubt that they need it, a lot of them though, considering some of the jobs out there. But yeah, it's a very big expat sport, but they're trying to, increase the number of local players who are actually playing. My club, USRC Tigers, they are based in Kowloon in Hong Kong, which is, one of the more, local communities. So we probably have one of the biggest, local population in our club. And the rugby union is trying to, push that more and more, because it's has to become sustainable in some way. You can't just be reliant on, expats coming in, and then as well people like me who grow up in Hong Kong but then end up moving away and are tough, to move your life back from having gone to university in Europe or America all the way back to Hong Kong, having, been away for so long. So it's big. I don't think it's as big as people think it is, because Hong Kong has 8 million people, and only a tiny percentage of them are expats in the first place. And then a tiny percentage of those people play rugby. Soccer or football is by far and away the biggest sports in Hong Kong still, though.
How many clubs are there? Like, what's the divide between? Obviously, in the UK, there's like 11 tiers of rugby to play through, and of course, only the top one point, like 1.2, because there's like 2 or 3 championship clubs which are full-time professionals. How does it working through in Hong Kong?
So at mini level, there's more clubs, obviously, because you need less people. People don't want to travel as far to, go bring their 8-year-old to a rugby training. After you get
Yeah.
out of that minis into youth, some of those clubs kind of dissipate away and they amalgamate into, the 6 bigger clubs in Hong Kong. So there's only really 6 big clubs in Hong Kong. Certain ones have certain demographics depending on where they are. Certain ones have certain better funding depending on, how historic the club is, or the history of it, the members of the club. But yeah, it kind of goes the 6 top clubs, and they all have second teams, and then the second teams all play in a league, and those teams are occasionally joined by some of the smaller clubs who may have, smaller, playing numbers, but there's no like promotion or relegation between those 2 divisions, because it's mainly first and second teams kind of playing on a similar schedule to the what the men's teams are doing. And then it's a semi-pro league technically, but all these people are either, again, working in financial jobs or any other type of job that you'd find in an international city, or they have come over and they are playing and then also coaching at whatever club they are, and kind of making ends meet that way. The clubs do help, provide accommodation based off, they get support by the Hong Kong Rugby Union because they own some apartments. So they're encouraged to, give those out to Hong Kong eligible players that they might be looking to sign to kind of sweeten the deal to come. But yeah, so a lot of guys will be coaching 2 to 3 days a week with the youth teams and being paid by the club, and then also getting paid as, you do in the UK on a match basis, depending on match fees. Different clubs have different pay structures. Some have retainers and stuff like that, but most of the players, to be fair, in like the starting 15 and 23 will get a match fee, and certain players will get more depending if they're like an import or something like that.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty familiar setup then. Like similar to like some of the pro setups you'll have in the UK where players will not necessarily coach for the same club, or go and coach for a couple local teams to then supplement the income they'll get from their wage playing semi-pro rugby. And how far away are these teams around Hong Kong? Like what's the furthest away day that one might have in the league?
The furthest away day is probably like 45 minutes.
Yeah,
Um,
that's wild.
Two of the clubs are genuinely a 10-minute walk from each other. I don't know, you've never been to Hong Kong, but there's a club called the Hong Kong Football Club, and there's a club called Valley Fort, and they are both based in Happy Valley. That's the area, what it's called. As you can hear by the name, like Valley Fort, and then the football club is where, I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of Hong Kong, but the big horse racing track that has like the pitches in the middle, that's the Hong Kong Football Club, and that they've got a lot of money behind them. They're over 100 years old, I think, the club. But yeah, those are literally 10 minutes apart from each other, and probably my club might be one of the furthest from them, and that's pretty much just dependent on traffic. But if you wanted to take public transport, which I had to do from the Hong Kong Football Club where I played football growing up to the rugby, my club Tigers, it would take me 30 minutes to 45 minutes on public transport. So
Right, so pretty tight together. No crazy bus journeys then. Nothing to write
no,
home
not
about
at all.
then. So talk me through how that then transitioned on the theme of crazy bus journeys to you moving over to Durham, because that must have been a slight culture shock going from Durham down to say Exeter on an away day. That's a long. You might have to fly that one. But talk me through how that transition worked for you moving over to university.
In terms of the whole experience, it wasn't actually too bad because growing up in Hong Kong, you're so busy all the time that it's not necessarily like you're not going home every single day and having a family dinner. So when I moved to university in the first place, like I wasn't necessarily homesick because I was used to being quite independent, and that kind of transferred over into the rugby. Like I kind of just got on with my day. If it meant like I had to walk, 25 minutes maybe to the rugby pitch, but that was just normal for me being in Hong Kong, where you kind of walk everywhere, you take public transport everywhere. And then in terms of just like the travel stuff, obviously that was a little bit different, having not done like an away trip kind of like that before. But it wasn't anything too bad, especially then moving to Canada where you realize how long away trips can actually get. It was just a different experience. Obviously the weather was a big thing, just forcing yourself to get out there in the cold and wet of the Northeast. But yeah, it was a good change in my opinion. It was something that I was always wanting to do. When I was 16, I wanted to try go to boarding school, but I couldn't get a scholarship or anything like that. But because I knew that that was what I needed to do to pursue higher levels of football or rugby. So as soon as I got out there, I was just ready to go, just wanting to see like test my mettle against the guys that were there and see what it was like.
Yeah, no doubt. That must have been a bit of a transition because you're an inside back, right? You play 10, 12, maybe a bit at fullback as well.
Yeah, yeah. 10, 15, and now kind of doing a little bit of 12 as well. Not a crash ball 12 by any means, despite my size, but more of like a playmaking 12, similar to what a Farrell would be like for England. Still able to carry, but mainly there for distribution and being a second playmaker. But yeah, obviously the physicality as an out half, everyone's targeting you as soon as you go to the UK. It's a little bit less nice at rugby than Hong Kong because in Hong Kong, everyone knows each other and no one's necessarily going out to hurt each other either.
That's what I was going to ask, was the difference between the conditions and the playing mentality, because obviously, I guess for the most part, it sounds like the rain's pretty warm, but when it's not raining, it's obviously pretty dry. So how you play the game as a fly off in those conditions is going to be very different to coming over and doing it on a rainy Friday night in the arse end of nowhere. Did that have to change the game a little bit, the way you were playing?
For me, not that much because I grew up playing like Gaelic football. I kick a lot. That's the reason I'm a fly half, because
Yeah.
from the age of when you're able to start kicking in rugby, I was like, yeah, that's me. I already kick the ball all the time in GA. But So I'd always had, a tendency to be a bit more of a kicker, being able to ping corners and stuff like that. But I know for a lot of people coming over, there's a big difference between the running rugby of Hong Kong and having to play a little bit more tactically, but it's also the inverse. Now, if I go back to Hong Kong or anyone going from Europe to Hong Kong, it's a lot quicker. You've got to be fitter. The ball and ruck speed is a lot faster. So it's also the inverse when you go over there because you just have to, adapt to that. Obviously, they still play territory and play territory and kicking game, but you have more license to kind of attack from a little bit deeper because the ball is less wet and the conditions are a little bit better.
Yeah, there's a little less risk, I suppose, with the conditions. Like it's not a ticking time bomb of a ball like you often play with in some deep midwinter game somewhere in the UK. And you mentioned earlier how there's a club on the centre of the racetrack, which I assume is a grass pitch. But are these like grass pitches you're playing on in Hong Kong, or are there quite a lot of artificial ones?
Pretty much grew up playing on artificial grass my whole life. The only times you really get to play on grass is occasionally. There might be some well-kept ones. There was one in particular around Hong Kong Stadium where the Sevens teams, before going out onto the main Hong Kong Sevens pitch, would use that to warm up. So they kind of kept that in good nick because it was owned by the Hong Kong Rugby Union as well. But most of the pitches just don't survive because it's so hot. And most of the pitches have just been converted into kind of turf pitches. And so that's when I play on turf now, a lot of people complain, but I'm perfectly fine with it. My joints and everything don't feel any worse or better off because it's just what I grew up playing on. And personally, obviously as a kicker as well, I just enjoy playing on it because it's a lot more consistent than playing on grass. But yeah, like I played on it my whole life, not too much grass, but when you did get the opportunity to play on grass, you did get.
Yeah, it's so funny how you particularly use the word opportunity to play on grass, where most of the time I'm begging for an artificial pitch because it's so horrible playing on some of these grass pitches, which aren't really pitches, they're just bogs. It's just a field with some lines painted on them. Someone stuck a couple posts up and called it a pitch. But like it's even worse when you're in like mid-season training on a Tuesday and a Thursday and you're having to run around in a bog practicing like your contact. We did a rucking drill last week and I was like, what on earth is this about? Like, I'd much rather be playing on an artificial surface, which is completely reliable, although it is a bit like Marmite because some people love it, like myself, with like flat surface like you're talking about for a kicker, but a lot of forwards hate it for the burns they're going to get afterwards and the stress it puts on their joints.
Yeah, like our training in Galway on Tuesday was cancelled because our pitches were closed because there was a storm coming, but also the pitch has just been in bits because of the weather. And I'm pretty sure, even though we don't have training today, it's been closed again for all the club teams and maybe even tomorrow. Hopefully, we'll be training on an indoor facility so we can kind of do our run through before the weekend. But yeah, no, I 100% get the fact that sometimes it's just unplayable and it doesn't really contribute to playing fast, attractive rugby, which you're always looking to play. Depending on what level you are at, the terrible pitches can suit some teams who are just big forward packs who just want to carry up all the time. But at least my team this year, we play quite expansive rugby, and we need a decent pitch to be able to do that.
It changes the way that you can play the game 100%. And you often hear people suggesting the idea of a summer rugby season, like they do in rugby league, a little bit more so in other sports. And I don't think that is necessarily the answer because rugby's not a summer sport. It is a winter sport. I'd rather play on something that's a bit wetter than something that's rock hard because it's been burnt and dried through. But another suggestion in the middle ground was taking maybe like 2, 3, maybe even 4 weeks off over the Christmas period from like halfway through December to halfway through January to then have a little bit of a drier track around the key parts of the season to actually make the games a bit more interesting to watch because it's not all just catch and drive rugby.
Yeah, I think it's just finding that balance between, wanting the first team, for example, at a club to have a good pitch to play on, and then also being able to allow the younger teams to train. Like, say, for example, our season will finish, as you said, kind of mid-December and start again more so towards the start of January. But so we won't be training necessarily on that pitch, but I guarantee there might be other trainings or other matches going on.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just, being able to look at all the stakeholders and be like, okay, how do we balance actually our first team or our men's team being able to play and train on a good pitch versus having, the youths and the minis just trampling on it during the week. So, in an ideal world, you're at a rugby club who has an artificial pitch where you can train on, and then a match pitch which you can actually play on. One of my clubs, Tiarnan in Dublin, one of my old clubs, they have that exact circumstance, so they kind of get to maintain their main pitch whilst being able to do all the hard training and beating up of the players on the Astro.
And the RFU are great at investing in stuff around the UK with that. The number of artificial pitches that have popped up over the last decade is astronomical. When I was playing in Harpen in North London, we had one that was owned by the RFU. So that's the only thing, is that they build it, but then they also make all the money from it as well. Like, the club loses ownership. They almost have to rent it off the RFU to put their own home trainings on. So that's an interesting business move that sort of divides a few, but at least you get that consistent surface, that reliable playing pitch to play on and train on, importantly, throughout the season. But we're talking a lot about the UK here. We've spoken a lot about Hong Kong. Of course, we'll touch on Ireland because that's where you are at right now. But I want to go to Canada first. How on earth did you end up there? Of course, you've got your family upbringing and stuff, but what was the move over there like? I just want to briefly interrupt this episode to remind you that this podcast is brought to you by potentially your business. That's right. We're on the hunt for some more sponsors. We've had some great ones along the way so far, but we're looking for ever more. So if you know of any businesses who may be looking to access an audience of rugby enthusiasts, aka rugby noses, then please drop us a message on Instagram at @TalkingRuggers, and we can begin some conversations from there. But otherwise, I hope you're enjoying the episode, and I won't delay you any further. Thank you so much for your support. Let's get straight back to it.
Yeah, so after I finished university, I ended up coming to where I am now, Galway, for a year. And
Right.
then, but before that, I had spent the summer. So the summer after graduating university, I went to Toronto in Canada, and I just went out there to kind of, experience, work, play rugby. My brother was at university there, or still is, and he was playing for a club out there as well as his university. So I just joined them. They were one of the best teams in Ontario, and I just wanted to kind of put my name out there. I ended up representing like Ontario, like at a provincial level in an interprovincial all Canada tournament. And at the time they had the MLR team, the Toronto Arrows. So I went out there to kind of, try stick my name in there. They had the Toronto Arrows Academy at the time, who is the team that I ended up representing. And I did well enough. Like, we won what we call the Coast to Coast Cup, which included 3 teams, one from the West Coast, one from the East Coast, and one from Ontario. So we won that. And then after that, I reached out to the Canadian National Development Team, the Pacific Pride, who play out in the West Coast. And I kind of reached out to them and started, a dialogue with them, having now a bank of Canadian, history and experience and coaches who they could talk to, etc. But then after, as I mentioned, I went to Galway for the season. I got in touch, continued communication with the national development team, and I ended up deciding to go out there despite the club in Galway, Galwegians, wanting me to stay here. But I kind of needed to go out there to put my name out and put it in front of the right people, because as much as sending footage does, trying to, the coaches to recognize you, it's not the same as being able to train in person and play in person in front of the coaches. And as well, it also just doesn't show the intangible parts of what being a rugby player is. So I ended up going out there in about August time, after spending another summer in Toronto playing, again, representative rugby. And then I played the first half of the season, played pretty well. I ended up by the end of the season, due to our captain going away to play with Canada. After, when he left, I ended up being the captain for a few games of the team, despite only being there for, a couple months at that point. And then, it was all looking good into January. And then the last practice game before we started the season again in January, I tore a ligament in my foot, and that kind of ruled me out for the second half of the season. But with that being said, it was all a success, because I ended up getting picked to the Canada national team extended squad by a coach who hadn't actually seen me play, because he was only appointed around the time that I got injured. So my point of going there, not only to be in front of the right coaches, but also to demonstrate, the intangibles and the things outside of rugby was true because he must have got some recommendation from some of the coaches or players that I played with, as well as having, watched some of the footage back from the bank of film that we had from that season. So up until that point. So I achieved my goal, albeit I wish I had been able to, go a little bit further by not getting injured and perhaps, push for, more Canadian national stuff in 2025. But I went out there with a goal and I succeeded in doing it. And after that, it meant that, that goal was done. Now it's time to try find the best rugby opportunity playing wise possible. And that's why I'm here in Galway.
What a story. What a roller coaster you've been on, all these ups and downs, but traveling a fair distance between them as well. That's a real interesting place to end up playing rugby in Canada, because it's a bit turbulent there, as well as your story with all these injuries. Canadians rugby story as a whole is a bit turbulent too, because obviously they had the Toronto Arrows as well, which since folded. Like the World Cup is coming out to America in a few years' time, which is pretty close by. What's it like, the state of rugby out there? Not just professional, but positive, is it?
I can't comment on as much recently, especially since a lot of the MLR teams have folded over the last few months. But I can imagine it's a little bit downcast because all of us are looking for opportunities to try playing the MLR. That's the goal. Because as Canadians, as of right now, we still count as local players, so we don't take up an international slot on the club teams in the MLR. So I can imagine it's a little bit disappointing, especially for the Canadians who are on those teams, who now have to try find other teams or have to go back to playing club rugby. But in terms of the actual national team, it's obviously positive because they qualified for the World Cup. It was disappointing when they didn't qualify for the last one 3 years ago. But now with a new coach in, managed to win some games and it's trending upwards. Obviously, results not necessarily going our way as of recent since qualifying for the World Cup, but we also haven't managed to have our full team because you have players who play in France who haven't been released, and then you have injuries, and then for loads of reasons that you're missing some few players, but it's definitely trending upwards, especially with the women's rugby doing so well as well. And the quality from it looks like when I'm looking at team sheets of the clubs out in BC in the west of Canada, it looks like every week there seems to be, good teams going out and playing. So I think it's going well. There's going to be some disappointment aspects of it in terms of the MLR teams folding, and obviously a few years ago the Toronto Arrows folding, and that being the Canadian team. But we're hoping now, having qualified for the World Cup, you get more sponsors and stuff who want to kind of fund the rugby more, and it can be more sustainable for a lot of the guys who are trying to play for the national team.
Yeah, I mean, it's a booming market. Rugby as a whole is getting somewhere. It's been in financial turmoil, obviously, especially in the UK, with teams collapsing, not just folding, but really imploding in on themselves over the past few years. But it seems like it's moving in the right direction towards a more profitable product, which we'll get onto later in the episode, talking about how we can save the game. But that's then led you in pursuit of representing Canada's national team all the way back to Ireland. Where are you now? What's the crack? What's your plan to get yourself into that national team?
Well, yeah, so I came back to Galwegians. Like, there was a couple reasons. Obviously, I love the club. The club were really eager to have me back, especially after the one season I was here. They had a few down years, a couple relegations, 2 relegations in 3 years or so. And then I came in, obviously, with a bunch of other players, not just me. And then we ended up getting promoted back up to the division that we are in now. Last year, they had a disappointing start to the year, like crazy start to the year. They lost their first 7 games in a row, but all with losing bonus points. So they lost their first 7 games, all within 7 points. I think 2 or 3 of them were last minute penalties. So they definitely weren't out the fight.
Brutal.
But then they had a miraculous second half of the season where they ended up coming fourth, which put them into the playoffs. They ended up having too many injuries at the end of the day and didn't get promoted. But they wanted to have me back, and I was eager to come back. Obviously, I was looking at different options, like mainly looking in Ireland. There were opportunities to potentially go 1 or 2 divisions higher, but I knew the club here. I knew the people here. I was coming off, as I said, an injury. I still wasn't back playing when I was making my decision. And it was a good decision that I did come because, I ended up picking up a few injuries just at the start of the season, which is a lot more difficult to deal with when you're in an unfamiliar place. And as well, I'm also a player coach at the club. So I help with the attack and the backs for the first team, as well as being the head of the youth pathway at the club. So that affords me the ability to be able to, pursue my training at a more professional like standard, because I don't have to necessarily work a part-time job. I could work a part-time job and I probably have the time for it, but it would be a lot more cycling around the city, and a lot more pressure on the body compared to just being able to train full time almost. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do to play for the national team. I spoke to the Canadian coach, and pretty much as long as I play well and I'm training at a level and outside of rugby, as well as outside of team training and inside team training, that's pushing me and my abilities further and further, then I've just got to put my hand up and hope the performances come good. And as well, Galwegians are in a unique position this year that obviously we're right in Galway. We have Connacht, the rugby team, right there. So we actually got a good influx of academy players. So this year, in one game, I could be playing with, 5 to 7 academy players who, are future professional players. It looks like a lot of them are. So it's not like, just despite being the fourth tier in Ireland 2B, after 1A, 1B, 2A, and 2B, the team that we have isn't of that quality. So that's also a good side to looking at it. And it has reflected in our results. I've rage baited quite a few people online in Ireland, it seems, by calling us statistically the best rugby club in Ireland, which obviously we're not the best rugby club in Ireland. We play in 2B, the fourth tier. We're the only rugby club in Ireland who's won every single game with a bonus point. We're the only team with 40 points out of 40 points. So that's why I like to say statistically rather than definitively.
That is hilarious. But no, I'm here for a stat, especially one that can be framed in such a way to make you sound so good. But it sounds like, at least from my understanding, hearing all this stuff from you, we're two very similar people. Both studied management and marketing at university, which we were chatting about before the episode. Both stand at 6'3" tall. Both inside backs. Both played for a club who I was at Harpenden in North London, the team with the artificial pitch I was talking about. And we are based just down the road from Saracens. So we get an influx of Sarries players as well, similar to you with Connacht. We went through a season where we also lost every game before Christmas by 2 or 3 points. And then for the next year, we went undefeated. So it's a very similar story here. And yeah, chasing the dream whilst like living the dream. When you have this ability to be around rugby full time, it's a great place to be, although it can be potentially a little bit more stressful on the finances side of things. We're both 24 years old, another similarity, I suppose, which means that, yeah, we're in a fortunate position where we can go and chase those dreams. But I want to talk to you a little bit about potentially the pressure you may similarly be feeling that I always put myself on before every game, apart from the fact that it feels like every time you grace the field, the stakes might be a bit higher than for everyone else, because you want that game film. You want to be able to show people that you are capable of playing at the next level. How do you manage that pressure? Is that something you really feel, or am I just making that up?
I don't feel it too much, because I know that I could have a poor game in some aspects, but I know that in other aspects, I'm going to have managed the game well, for example. Because at the end of the day, as a 10, for example, if you win the game, you've probably done all right, because you're managing everything, you've played in the right areas. So by the end of the season, yes, they'll look through the match footage, and you're trying to play for match footage to an extent. But if you win every single game during the season, and say, for example, if I start the rest of the games, hopefully I would have started 16 or 15 out of the 18 games. If that's the case and you've won all of them, you've clearly done something right. So in the grand scheme of the season, people are going to be looking at the team performance as a whole, because no coach or club is really going to be looking at all 18 minutes of all 18 games. So I don't really pay too much mind to it, because it's just, we're playing rugby at the end of the day. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. In my opinion, there's other, things that impact your ability to, be picked for a team. You're not just reliant on your own performance, you're reliant on other people's performances as well. So I just go out there and just try win the game, do everything that I can and go through my processes that I know that work well for me. Particularly after my injury, I've struggled a little bit in certain things like kicking because my injury was right on my foot, like right through the center. So, it's a little bit of a mental block. So every game is just going out there, trying to go through the processes and trying to alleviate that mentality. And so far, it's been relatively working. And then even if you do make any mistakes, it's always just an opportunity to kind of, get better, go to the pitch the next week on your own time, look back through the footage as well, and kind of just practice the mistakes that you've made.
I always talk to any fly half that I work with through my coaching business about the most desirable trait a fly half can have, in a coach's eyes at least, isn't catch pass, it's not kicking, it's not contact, it's not your running game, it's just trust. And that comes down in large part just to ability to find a way to win games. If you have trust from a coach, that's the player who's going to consistently get picked. I've played myself in a team where I might be a little bit more on the edge of, like, a bit, not for want of a better word, not to be too up my own arse, but a bit flary, like a bit too loose cannon, like, whereas they would rely on someone who's just going to kick corners, kick and press down the end of the field, which is something I've then worked on in later years. But yeah, it's an interesting trait to have, especially when you're relying so much on other players around you in that position.
Yeah, I think as well because I'm quite a talker on the pitch. Like off the pitch, I'm quite reserved to myself, a little bit introverted, but on the pitch and around rugby when it comes talking about rugby, which I kind of showcase on my social media, like I can talk for ages about it, and it transfers to that onto the pitch, even just in defense. Like I have no issue just screaming from the backfield, and because my voice sounds a little bit funky compared to most of the people who are on the pitch, it's heard. And that also comes into attack, like being able to communicate with the forwards. And also when I'm not playing 10, if I'm playing 12 or 15, kind of linking out the back of shape and communicating. So, you know, that's why I don't put too much pressure on myself either, because the performance visually might not be the best, but your ability to do things like communicate that don't necessarily show up on the film unless, it's being picked up on the cameras, which a lot of the time it is because I'm screaming so loudly from on the defensive side. But those are the things that once you get those opportunities in front of the right people, those are the things that will actually stand out, not necessarily the catch pass thing, the just being able to, step someone, because you can get loads of people who can do that. But as you'll know, having played on many teams, the thing that people do struggle to do is the non-rugby bits a lot of the time.
Those soft skills around the game. I always took pride in the fact that any team that I joined from a young age, like whether that be county rugby, going on to ACAD, or just playing club or school, that first meeting in the changing rooms, we were all just sat there a bit nervous. I'd always be the first person to break the ice. I'd take pride in that responsibility as a fly half, as a leader in a team, to go through and just be that guy to start the chat and just get things moving in the right direction. But they have been for you. You've played at some great levels. Is there anyone in particular in your life as a role model who's really stood out and progressed your journey, whether it's a coach or a family member or anyone like that, or anyone on the field, a professional player that you really look up to?
There's probably been two coaches. More recently, my coach in Canada, Essie, not necessarily because it was anything, leadership wise or anything like that. He was a great coach. He's the coach of the Canada under 20s as well. But just he brought some new ideas that I really hadn't thought about before, which I've now kind of applied as an attacking coach, just taking in a lot of information from him. And then as well in Ireland, Terranor, legendary coach Sean Skeena. He's not the coach there anymore, or Sean Skean. And just his attacking philosophy that really switched up the way that rugby is played in Division 1A in Ireland. He came in, I'm pretty sure it was his first year, the 1 year I was there. It might have been like his second. And he really brought an attacking philosophy to a league that a lot of people, given the conditions of the weather in Ireland, kind of preconceived to be, very kick heavy, bad, boggy pitches. So, his attacking flair really opened my eyes to what, if you have guys who are bought in and are willing to actually almost memorize what needs to be done, can really take a team to that next level. But in terms of players and direct coaches on me, because I grew up in Hong Kong, right now in Hong Kong, there's more of an emphasis on like, the youth setup and the under 16s, and you have guys who are like training more so with like the national team. But when I was there, like it was very much just, you train together before like a big tournament, and you just train with your club otherwise. So it was never really like one-on-one coaching that I had that necessarily influenced me too much. But in terms of players, like I just appreciate being able to play with ex-professionals, professionals around the pitch. Like right now, we get one of the player coaches on our team. His name's Jared Butler. He played for Connacht over 100 times, and he captained Connacht as of recently, as of like 2.5 years ago. So just being any opportunity, being able to play around professionals or ex-professionals, I just like pinch myself sometimes and just think, wow, this is cool.
Yeah. It's so funny how some players end up in some random places. I'm back in Bournemouth on the south coast right now, and Greg Tonks, don't know if that's a name that rings any bells for you, but he was a Scottish international player. He was the lad who Israel Folau took that crazy catch above his head against Scotland. That was on him. And he now coaches at Bournemouth, which is a funny place. But you mentioned Owen Farrell earlier as well. I mentioned Israel Folau there. Is there any like players who are real idols for you, role models, or people you try and emulate your game around?
Yeah, like Johnny Sexton is the obvious one. Just his mentality. Some people think he's a bit of a hard ass, which, I guess he can be, but he's just so laser focused. I'm probably a little bit more relaxed, especially off the pitch. But in terms of just knowing the detail, and especially as he got older, the fact that he was still effective despite not having, the physical abilities of when he was younger, just shows how detailed orientated he was. And he was able to still, manipulate defenses and, allow Ireland to play at that top level despite his age. Obviously, unfortunate what happened at the World Cup, losing to New Zealand. But yeah, he'd probably be my biggest one, because he was the Irish 10 that I watched pretty much like the majority of my life. I probably got when I was younger, like the late era of Ronan O'Gara, but mainly Johnny Sexton would be kind of that influence, because despite liking to think that I'm a little bit more physically, potentially gifted than him, I still probably play a similar type of game as him, like more of a game manager with a little bit of flair. So, you know, he was definitely an influence on me, like a big inspiration growing up.
What a player. What a player. It's a shame he didn't go on to win as much as he's possibly capable of, but he's another example of a player that me and my friends talk about as someone who just finds a way to win games. Potentially not ones at Rugby World Cups, but probably a bit of a sore point, but otherwise just finds a way to manage things out and find a way to, get his team on the right side of the scoreline. And yeah, of course, you've played in loads of different places across the world. Is there any memory along this journey that stands out for you more than others? Have you got any favourite moments?
One of the favorite moments probably be last season. We won the Coastal Cup in BC. We beat UBC in UBC, and despite some people thinking it might have been a given, but we just dominated that game. I think it was like 31-7 or something. So being able to win that trophy with a new team that I'd kind of joined, but also just the experience of having gone down to Australia, because I played there for about 3 months. Just having that experience is incredibly memorable, getting to see what life living like is down there. And even though we didn't necessarily have any, ridiculous stories or anything like that, or huge monumental moments, it was just the whole experience being down there that's kind of has stuck with me.
Yeah, incredible. And you seem to be ticking off all these, not all of them. I suppose Ireland and the UK are pretty big time nations, but those middle tier nations, having spoken with Max Kurt's Code, who's been to Hong Kong himself, but also goes to some really niche rugby places in Sri Lanka, per se. Is there any advice that you have for people on how to go around the world playing rugby?
Yeah, like for example, before this season, I went onto this Facebook page called Rugby Union Vacancies or something. There's about 50,000 people on that page, and I made a post with my CV, like a photo of myself. And a lot of people will post like anonymously, being like, I'm this, this, and this, because you can post anonymously on there to try to feel out the interest. And then they put their stats, they're not necessarily super precise. But I just went straight for it, and to not be afraid of the situation that you're in, the club that you're in. If you're trying to go to a higher level, should respect your want to do so, because you always may come back. You may be years older, but you may still be a positive, impact on the club, and shouldn't hopefully want to sour that relationship, potentially stop you moving on. And then in terms of actually getting there and, acclimatizing and becoming part of the club, it's really just important to, really show that you have the drive when you're there, not just showing up, making sure that you're always asking questions, but also managing, being too much. Like for myself, I'm quite a loud person in terms of on the pitch, in terms of, talking to my teammates, not necessarily even in a negative way or telling them to get around the park, but just like constantly feeding information. I wouldn't do that in the first training when nobody knows me. I get some reps under my belt in terms of a couple trainings so people can actually see, okay, this guy has the skill to back up all the talk, and then you go from there. So, it's the same way as managing any relationship that you have with any new person that you meet. Just, don't necessarily dive head first because you can, rub people the wrong way. Just, take it as you go and don't be afraid in the first place to put yourself out there when to try to move around different places. And once you get there, once you kind of get that foundation, show from the start that you actually have a drive, you have a goal, you want to be part of the club, even if you're only there for a year. Do everything that you can to be a part of it. Go to junior games, go to women's games, just be about the social life, and they'll hopefully just take to you very easily.
Yeah, it's a whole skill set, learning how to go to new clubs. When I was a kid, I went from Oak Medians down in Bournemouth Town Centre up to Ringwood when I was like 13, then over to Bournemouth Rugby Club. I played for Dorset and Wilts, played for Hampshire Rugby, then yeah, went and played for loads of different clubs through my teen years as well. Went to Beech and Cliff School in Bath, played for Avonvale, all these different teams, and like learning how to actually manage that process of being a new person in the environment, especially as a fly half, when you're probably already up against some other players, like trying to force your way into a squad without irritating people, knowing who to keep on side is a complete skill set in itself. And it sounds like something you've really had to learn how to do with the amount of places you've been playing rugby.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously it helped growing up in Hong Kong as well. You're kind of exposed to different cultures already, different groups of people. So it helped in that regard because you weren't completely obtuse to meeting people of different places and actually understanding local normalcy.
Yeah. Oh wow, what a story you've got. And that's a real interesting way of going about this whole rugby journey, where I was pretty tied to the UK and then have slowly explored other places. It's an interesting one. And you've started to really broadcast it on your social media. Talk me through how that started for you and some advice you might have for someone who's trying to get into the social media game.
Funnily enough, it started when I did my year work abroad. That's when I was first in Ireland. I played at Tiarnan that season and I was working as part of my university degree and playing rugby, focusing on rugby. And I thought, I don't know anyone here. Screw it. I'll start making social media stuff. It was some of it was rugby, some of it was other stuff. A lot of it was very cringe and pretty much all of it's been deleted now off my account. But then I slowly built it up. And by the end of that season, I had about 6,000 followers. And I thought, okay, I actually have enough followers where I'm not going to stop posting when I go back to university. So I kept posting at university, grew my account to about, I think, 12,000 by the end of university. Obviously, I got some stick from some of the players, but I didn't really care too much. I was injured for quite a bit of the time. So uh, I was spent a lot of the time in my room where I could just like come up with whatever content I could. And then from there on, I just started posting and, on TikTok more and more. I used to be called a different name and I used to post like more just relatable rugby content. But as of recently, since I've been back in Ireland, I changed my name to the Rugby T because I really wanted to hone in on specifically, rugby, more serious rugby stuff, showcasing training, opinions, and kind of go into that more media related space for rugby rather than just like relatable meme type rugby posts that you see on social media a lot of the time. But funnily enough, I only actually started posting on Instagram last season around October time. And so in just over a year, I got about 28,000 followers on there. And I was pretty much just downloading all my old rugby TikToks from TikTok and just uploading them to Instagram. And given that I had been posting on there for about 3 years, there were hundreds of posts. Like you can see on my account, I have about 800 posts. Probably about 600 of them are from back over the last 3 or 4 years of posting on TikTok. And, you know, that kind of got me the followers. And to be fair, I could just continue posting, that relatable rugby type content, the more of the meme stuff. But I didn't want to do that for me. And I thought it would be better in terms of trying to find, potential brand opportunities and partnerships, as well as, showcasing myself in a better light, or not necessarily that the light was poor, but just showcasing what I really have to offer. Would be better to focus on more of the training stuff, more of my actual journey, and create those relationships with my followers. So they're actually following for me rather than just, whatever thing that they find funny that I post about rugby.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of approaching it. Do you have like a content strategy, a plan, like a calendar to follow along for these things? And how have you gone about finding any sort of collaborative partnerships? Is that something you've had any success with?
So my strategy right now is pretty much just I have one thing that I know that I'm posting per week. And that's kind of like my week of training, which I call Road to International. So I post that. Now that I'm not injured and I'm actually playing games, I'll post anything related to my actual match on there. It might be a try, it might be something that I did well, something that I did poorly. Some of the time, I'll meme this myself if I do something poorly, because obviously you don't want to just showcase only the good things. And then as well, one of the things that I've done pretty well is just showing everything that I did in the game. So good and bad. So I show the missed kicks to touch, show the poor passes, poor tackles, and it's literally just 3 minutes long of my personal, not even highlights, just every single thing that I did, apart from maybe like a 1 or 2 meter pass that's pretty insignificant. So people like to see that, insight and full transparency. But other than that, I don't really have a plan, to be honest. It's kind of taken a back seat because, as you mentioned, in terms of partnerships, I've been posting on social media for 4 years, and across both accounts, I probably have about 70,000 followers. Over 15 million likes at this point, probably, and I've made zero money off social media in 4 years. I've been sent some things by Rugby Bricks, which I'm very appreciative for. Some kicking tees, some grip socks. I've recently started working with a rugby gym app called Curva, which I have a code for. But obviously, you need people to. That's a little bit bigger investment if you're gonna pay for an app versus just like having a discount code for protein or something. Which I've reached out to multiple companies like that and haven't got anything back for them, but I was hoping that having changed my name, that might help in the future. So we'll see how that goes. And, just hoping to, have more opportunities to work in the media space, kind of take advantage of my marketing degree and just social media aptitude to work with businesses or, rugby related things. Obviously, it's hard being based in Ireland. There's limited opportunities, and a lot of them are kind of taken up by well founded names, but you kind of just take it as you come. But that's part of the reason that I don't really take social media too seriously, to be honest, because I'm not reliant on it. I'm not trying to milk it for money because I've never had it. So I kind of just post what I want to post, what I feel people will like to watch, and stuff that I'm more proud of being able to put out.
Yeah, social media is, at least in the rugby space, this hyper glamorized thing where people are like, "Oh my god, are you making loads of money from this?" And you're like, "Not as much as you think, if anything at all." And it's a tough place to be, but that's when you know your head and most importantly your heart are in the right place, where you don't rely on that extrinsic stuff, the external outcomes and rewards, whether it's from the basis of likes and views all the way through to that financial side. If you're relying on that to keep you going, you won't last very long. Like, I'm much the same as yourself. I've been doing this since 2020, and if I relied on those things, I would have stopped by the end of the year because they don't come in thick and fast. You've got to start to actually build a personal brand. And that's what's really interesting about the transition you've made to this slightly more professional outlook, is that people are genuinely interested in the way that you play the game. Like, after I finish the game, I, for the rest of the week, will sit through and watch my clips back on repeat, the same clips over and over and over again. And it's the same for a lot of people out there, especially in the fly half position, where you're just constantly reviewing film, constantly obsessing over the game, and you're giving people an outlet to obsess over something other than their own game. And it's really interesting to see how that whole process is really kicked on for you. It's fascinating to hear it from the inside out, to understand the way you've made that transition to slightly more professional stuff.
Yeah, because obviously, as you mentioned, it helps in terms of analyzing my own game, because if I'm going through picking out the things that I've done to post to social media, I'm automatically watching them back myself. It also does help that as a coach, I have to watch back the games and do video review. In the video review, I'm looking at myself, I'm looking at my teammates, if I mess something up, I'm not necessarily putting it in the review being like, yeah, you did terrible. Like if you drop if I drop the ball, because I wouldn't do that about anyone in particular, but I would then put that on social media. So it's a, you get the best of both worlds, and you just having constantly watching over, you get to kind of just get content out of doing what my job is right now, is which is coaching. But after the game, after I watch through, it seems like I'm a little bit dissimilar to you in that regard. Like I kind of just park it. I take the big I take the big takeaways from the game, and I just move on to my next job, which is literally like, doing a team review, or, doing a preview of who we're playing on the weekend, and just thinking about content that I can post from the game. But as you said, like I'm not in it for the money. If anything, I'm in it just to build up a marketing portfolio for when I inevitably stop playing rugby and have to get a real job, being able to show, a business or a brand that I'm able to create content, engage with audiences, pick up on trends, and, develop hooks. And I've also created like another personal TikTok account, which over the last few months, I'm already up to about 8,500 followers on it. And I'm not doing that for, you know, money or views or anything. It's just to, again, create more of a portfolio to show that I'm able to, do these type of things, and, you have that as a backlog to show businesses in the future.
Yeah, clearly I had too much time on my hands as a kid with all the film that I'd be watching back, just constantly watching the same clips over and over again. Yeah, it's a smart move to make. It's the same with me when I was at university and I started this. I was like, I'd rather have something as well as my degree. I don't want to just leave with a degree the same as everyone else. I'd rather have something on top of that which can differentiate myself. So at the very least, if you walk away with nothing financially, at least you walk away with, like I said, like a portfolio, like you took the words out of my mouth, just a content portfolio. You can go to a business and be like, hey, I can help you with this. I can help you do that. And that brings us nicely all the way through to the final section, talking about the business side of rugby. We've spoken about you playing across the world with all those cool opportunities, about the social media side of things. What do you think is going to be the thing looking forward into the 21st century that's going to really make the difference to rugby and push it forward into this place of a profit?
I think it's actually making sure that you're able to engage with the casual fans, but not through part of the thing that I don't like seeing on social media is that the clips for rugby that tend to do well tend to be like hyper sensationalized aspects of it. So it could be either hyper sexualized, you know, attractive men or women. It could
Yeah.
be, just be a hyper focus on, big hits or anything. Like obviously those are cool and those make good clips. But I think it's really engaging with more the casual fan and bringing them into what it takes to be either a professional player or a professional team. England have started to do it very well with their social media content, showing the behind the scenes of how they train and how players eat in a day. And I think that showed dividends in terms of the way that the public has reacted to it. But also, just there's so much discourse between fans who often, are very casual level, and I think if you're able to engage with those people and take them to that next level, a lot of the negativity around certain aspects of rugby will go down and the engagement will go up. So I think in terms of that's my ideal way. It's probably not going to get as many clips as, some buff rugby player or some attractive female rugby player, which, I'm personally not that big of a fan of, because you go into the comments, you can see exactly why, the clips have done well. But I think continuing to engage and offering insights to what rugby actually is at a professional level is an important way to, for the future of rugby to grow.
Yeah. To use like marketing and in particular content terminology, it's the difference between reach, awareness, and engagement. Like you want to be reaching non-rugby fans, and that's what you do through that sensationalized content the word you use. Like that's a very good way of putting it. Like it's those big hits, those things that are relatable to any human being. Doesn't have to be understanding rugby, but you can see someone smash into someone else, and you go, "Blimey, that's pretty big deal." It's making the simple small things interesting, the engaging stuff like that. When you go and see inside camps, like the way that England Rugby do their docuseries, it's not just the insight, but the way that they construct it, making it look super pleasing, just pleasing on the eyes. It's quite nice to watch. It's quite cinematic, and making that stuff that's pretty low stim which is a problem for society as a whole. If we want to get into that, like that's the problem with social media. It's super high engaging, high endorphin, but whereas if there's low stim stuff, the stuff that's just the day-to-day things becomes more interesting because of, in that sense, more increased access. I was just chatting with Matt Doherty, the old Novo bloke, and he was talking about like the Living with the Lions series and how insightful that was, giving real insight into stuff rather than this hyper professionalized stuff, making that simple thing more interesting rather than sensationalizing the dramatic things is probably a very good idea.
And I think as well, teams that are trying to do it need to make sure that they get it right. A lot of teams will not necessarily get it right in terms of like what content they're putting out, but how they're doing it. As you said, like it has to be, pleasing to watch. And that's what England do so well. But like some people will just, grab a microphone or whatever and then start randomly asking, their players certain things. But if you don't create that as part of, say, a series, like where you do one a week where you ask questions, or the camera quality isn't like, perfectly crisp, people will just switch off instantly. So they need to make sure that they're doing it at a level for which people actually want to visually engage, and also can, engage with the content that they're doing at a level more than just, oh, what's your favorite X? If someone just says like a one word thing and offers no, semblance of emotion or anything like that, just cut that out because no one wants to see that. People want to see people going like giving a little bit of a context to their, opinions or whatever, to kind of engage with the personalities of the players. So it's just about picking and choosing what you do put out and how you go about and produce it.
A man with a marketing and social media brain. Someone put you in charge of something, because that sounds like a good idea to me. And speaking of social media, how can people help you out? If they've reached this far into the episode, they are a top rugby nose, so they'll definitely be actioning anything that you can suggest. So tell the people what they can do for you.
Well, you can follow me on TikTok and Instagram at the Rugby T, and kind of just engage with my content. I don't necessarily have anything that I sell or anything like that. Anything that I do have, you can just check the links in my descriptions. I post on my stories, and just engage with me in that way. Like, share, comment, give me a DM if you have any questions or anything like that that I can specifically help you with. A lot of people ask me, "Oh, how do I get better at rugby? I'm 16 years old." And I'm like, I can't help you with that because it's such a broad question. But if you have something specific about social media or rugby that you want to ask, feel free to just reach out. I check my DM requests all the time because I have loads of free time. And yeah, just, engage with my content on social media.
I'm sure they will, as they are most likely top Norse. So thank you guys, if you made it this far to the episode, for supporting Talking Ruggers. If you go a step further, go down into the description down below, drop a like on the episode, make sure you rate it 5 stars if that's the streaming platform you're on. Of course, subscribe for the next episode. Who do you want on next? Who in the rugby space you think would be good to talk to?
Perhaps Jim Flano from he's more of an Irish TikToker in general, but he's been doing the PA at the Aviva Stadium for Leinster games. So just a little bit of how that came about, his experiences. He does a lot of like rugby related content with Leinster, Ireland. He's even doing some work with the Irish NFL kickers and stuff like that. So I think he's got a interesting story to tell, especially because he's been on this journey for years, and now I think it's finally coming to fruition, all the hard work that he's put in. So yeah, Jim Flano.
Is a name I'm familiar with. He is on the list, and it sounds like a bloke full of personality. I was concerned when I saw a day in the life video of him on the PA. I didn't realize that he was doing that, and I was like, oh my God, who's trusting this guy on the mic? He sounds like he could have something bad to say at times, but definitely full of personality. So I'm sure I'll hit him up and we'll get him on sometime. But as for you, thank you so much for coming on. Really do appreciate it, and thanks for sharing your story.
No worries. Thank you for having me.